In the novel 1984, the party watches its citizens closely using telescreens which can see and hear almost everything you do. Any sound you make above the level of a very low whisper would be picked up by the telescreen. The government can plug in your wire whenever they wanted to listen in on your conversations. Did this, there was no way of knowing whether you were being watched at any given moment. Although there is no way George Orwell could have predicted the future correctly, he did come semi-close with telescreens and government overreach. But instead of telescreens being on the walls, we carried them in our pockets every day. A brief history of the FISA, NSA, and USA Patriot Acts. FISA was enacted in 1978 before the proliferation of the Internet and governed both the physical and electronic surveillance of primarily foreign powers and agents. That includes U.S. citizens and permanent residents suspected of espionage or terrorism. According to CompareItTech.com, this act provided judicial and congressional oversight of spying activities by intelligence agencies on foreign entities and U.S. citizens suspected of working with them. Perhaps most importantly, it officially removed the need for a court order to spy on foreign powers. Judicial authorization is required to spy on a U.S. citizen, but only within 72 hours after such spying has begun. The Patriot Act. Also known as the Uniting and Strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism act. It was shortly enacted after the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks. It was essentially an amendment to FISA that expanded surveillance to individuals not directly linked to terrorist groups. Also with this came roving wiretaps. A roving wiretap removes the need for a new surveillance order if a suspect throws away their phone or moves to a new address. For instance, it could also expand the scope of an investigation so that anyone who comes in casual contact with a suspected terrorist can be wiretapped. Lastly, under the Patriot Act, the FBI can order a person to produce documents to help protect against terrorists or foreign spies without a court order. These documents range from business records to library registries. This is later used when Verizon is ordered to turn over phone records. Finally, this act enables intelligence agencies to conduct investigations on lone wolves. A lone wolf is a person suspected of engaging in terrorism-related activities but without any ties to a terrorist group. Many of the most controversial parts of the Patriot Act, especially those dealing with bulk surveillance, expired in 2015, but were renewed in part or whole through the Freedom Act. Most of the controversial parts of the Patriot Act, however, were set to expire in 2015. The day before they expired, Congress passed the Uniting and Strengthening America by fulfilling rights in ending eavesdropping, dragnet collection, and online monitoring act. The USA Freedom Act renewed many of those expiring parts of the Patriot Act through 2019, with some new limits concerning bulk record keeping on telecommunication metadata of U.S. citizens. Congress added these limits in reaction to Edward Snowden's disclosures about bulk surveillance by the NSA on both U.S. and foreign citizens, which prompted a public backlash against the agency. This act also reauthorized roving wiretaps in the tracking of lone wolf terrorists. Weeks after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, the Patriot Act, specifically Section 215, gave law enforcement and intelligence agencies like the NSA the tools and authority to stop future attacks against the United States. They did this by collecting phone, cell data and piecing together all the information of suspected terrorists. However, it was also used to record and save call information of any number of domestic calls made, even by regular citizens. During the law signing ceremony of October 25, 2001, President Bush said, "This new law that I signed today will allow surveillance of all communications used by terrorists, including emails, the internet, and cell phones." Although supporters of the act and its primary founder, Wisconsin Republican Rep. Jim Sensenbrenner, thought they knew what the Patriot Act would start, they had no idea what it had really begun. Starting secretly in 2001, President Bush used his executive authority to allow the NSA to begin collecting phone records. It is said that anywhere between 30% and 100% of all domestic phone calls have been recorded. This information, referred to as metadata, has been the reason for many arrests across the United States. Over 310 major arrests were made just by 2004 due to the Patriot Act, ranging from kidnapping, drugs, to planned terrorism. The collected information, metadata, is not the words said in the call itself. However, it is all the information surrounding the call, like time, to who, and length of call. CNN gave some examples. For instance, repeated calls to a cardiologist might suggest a heart condition. Repeated late-night calls between two employees might suggest a romantic relationship. However, like all things surrounding this topic, there is much controversy. While it's been reported that Section 215 was only used to collect phone data, other reports have come in too. Todd Hinnon, an official from the Department of Justice, testified in 2011 that Section 215 has been used to obtain driver's license records, hotel records, car rental records, apartment leasing records, credit card records, and the like. The reasons behind the broad guess of 30 to 100% of phone records is because there's been no official statement, just bits of information. In June of 2013, a leaked FISA court order publicly revealed that the government was using Section 215 of the Patriot Act to collect the phone records of virtually every person in the United States. According to the Electronic Frontier Foundation, EFF.org, prior to the revelations, several senators warned that the DOJ was using Section 215 of the Patriot Act to support what government attorneys called a sensitive collection program, targeting large numbers of Americans. A group of anonymous U.S. officials told the Washington Post's Ellen Nakashima that Section 215 of the Patriot Act, which expired the last weekend of March in 2015, collected only 30% of domestic phone calls. But based off of Edward Snowden's initial disclosure, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, also known as the FISA Court, ordered Verizon to turn over all the domestic phone metadata for a portion of 2013, meaning that for that time, they were collecting and storing 100% of data they received. And in December of 2015, Matthias Schwartz of The New Yorker asked a spokesperson of the Director of National Intelligence to clarify. The only answer given was, "Unfortunately, we will not be able to provide you with a more narrow range." And when asked why, the spokesperson said, "I can't offer you any particular insight other than the matter is still being reviewed." These acts throughout the years have been changed, rewritten, and revoted on many times. However, they are all still very similar. I believe that this pattern will continue to happen throughout history, until one day, the laws go too far and we end up like the proles in 1984. However, there is a way to stop this from happening. If we protest and make our voices heard, they cannot stop us from making change. We are the next generation, and we will hopefully be the ones making these laws. For now, the best we can do is make our opinions heard, and hope that a high-ranking official will eventually make change.